Yep. So generally speaking, so the general assumption is that if you have a legal entity, that is a separate entity. Okay, so you would not be it's operating on its own, and if I have two entities, both of those entities are operating completely independently. That's the general assumption. Okay. However, if you determine, like through your monitoring or maybe just talking to the customer or the owner, if you determine that they are not operating independently. So in other words, funds are flowing between those two entities or those two legal entities, and maybe with the proprietor, the person who owns the company. If you make the determine that they're not independent, that is when they want you to start aggregating those together. And it could get very complicated. I've seen circumstances where, through the course of an investigation, the BSA department determined that, okay, so Kevin owns these 5 companies. These 3 companies over here, from what we can tell, they're completely independent. So we're going to still treat them independently. But Kevin seems to be using these 2 companies over here as his own personal piggy bank, and he's letting the funds flow between himself and these companies. Under those circumstances, I would document my conclusion. So you've done your investigation in the customer risk profile. I would document why you've determined that these 2 companies we should be aggregating together with Kevin, because it looks like these deposits that appear to be on behalf of the legal entity, they're actually on behalf of Kevin because he's using that legal entity as his own personal piggy bank. Now, if you detect that, also keep in mind, and this is kind of getting off course, but kind of getting into the legal ramifications of doing that kind of thing. It's actually not a good thing for your customer to be doing that. Okay. If remember, the whole purpose of having an LLC is to have limited liability. Okay, so if I have a company and it gets sued, and maybe they can bankrupt my company, but they can't come and sue me and take my stuff because it's a legal entity. Okay, that's the whole point of having one. Well, if I'm using that legal entity as my personal piggy bank, and there are funds from me going into the company, and there's funds from the company coming back to me, and it's not being done through the appropriate, kind of corporate process, then suddenly we can do what's called piercing the corporate veil. Okay, so let's say I'm doing that, and let's say my company gets sued. Okay, let's say my company goes bankrupt, but I'm thinking I'm protected over here. Well, if you've got a good attorney doing the suing and they sue the company and then they run out of money in the company, if they can prove that I have been using those funds and I have kind of, that I've dissolved the protection between me and my company, now they can come and sue me and they can take my stuff. Okay. So it is, if you detect that kind of thing, it's really that customer is playing with fire to begin with. But also from a CTR perspective, then you have to determine, okay, do we need to aggregate these funds together? And I would handle that at the customer risk level.